is Philadelphia Eagles undrafted free agent Maximus Pulley, the next variation of a familiar name for Philadelphia in Rodney McLeod. Give me a second to explain this kind of claim that I'm making here, guys, because I do think a lot of times these things get misunderstood. You can't project a guy that you've never seen play a single down of organized football to be somebody. I'm talking about the underlying physical traits. I'm talking about the underlying athletic traits. I'm talking about what I saw a little bit from their tapes, but there's absolutely 1,000% you got to go out there and play like a Rodney McLeod. I mean, that's a very high praise to give a player. However, the Eagles, if we're being honest here, have a very crazy history of yanking these unheralded, oftentimes undrafted free agent safeties and then being pretty damn successful. I mean, if you go back to, our guy Quentin, go back to Quentin Michael, unheralded guy that came in, hung his hat on special teams production and play, and then eventually he's made his way into the starting lineup and became a damn good football player. Past him, you go to actually to Rodney McLeod. And you take a look at Rodney McLeod coming in. Yes, of course he was an undrafted free agent for the Rams, not the Eagles. But nonetheless, this was a guy that very similar to Reed Blankenship, he didn't get that big contract extension from, his host organization, his home team. He had to actually come to Philadelphia to get that kind of contract, and the Eagles gambled on putting him beside Malcolm Jenkins. And Rodney McLeod, to this day, is still one of the top 3 or 4 guys I've watched play in an Eagles uniform in terms of that center field, free safety, kind of towards the weak side of formation. I mean, he's up there. The young man's, it wasn't necessarily that he was kind of twitched up the way that you see a CJ Gardner-Johnson was. It was instinct. This young man had a crap ton of instinct, and it came across on the film. You could definitely see his instinct take shape on film when it came to Rodney McLeod. So, I mean, it's very, very high praise for this. And then, obviously Reed Blankenship, another guy that came in as an undrafted free agent, a dude that was a little older coming out of college because of the injuries and stuff like that. He was one of the first guys we had kind of taken that had a 6-year kind of college, exploration period, if you will, because of injuries. So when you look at these guys and you look at how they kind of came into the league, a lot of these dudes came in with maybe quasi-testing measurables, but they did come in with a crap ton of experience and were very instinctive at playing the position. And then they hung their hats on special teams play until they could get in there and actually become, the guy, if you will, in the defense at the back end of stuff.
Break their wheel, let's go.
There are 3 drills I like to pay attention to, guys, when it comes to safeties when they're doing their testing, and I'm just going to lay it out for you and what I look for and kind of what I'm looking at as I watch them do these drills. The 3 that are the most important to me, and by the way, guys, this can vary by coaches, but I like to watch what they call a 45-degree drill. That essentially simulates getting over the top of a receiver, so it's basically playing deep halves, playing deep thirds of the field, if you will. You want to see if that guy's got the hips and can take a correct angle to the ball. Can he track and find the ball? And then also you have, the inverse of that drill, they call the 90-degree drill, which that's basically coming down into what we'd call the low zone, or what we'd call, basically you're coming down around the line of scrimmage and you're coming down there to stop a tunnel screen or, any kind of screen type situation, if you will, or even a running back kind of. You could kind of measure the way that they take a pursuit angle when it comes to stuff like that. So your 45s and your 90s, I definitely like to see how the guy actually moves. I like to see how fluid he is as a mover there. And the other one that I like to watch personally is a drill called a W. So W is just kind of this idea of kind of coming in and out of these zones, right? Especially when you're talking about a safety. A safety's got to be able to play deep and then kind of come up and creep his way up, kind of in the shape of a W a little bit, right? Because you're talking about coming in and out of zones with these guys. And a lot of times when you have concepts like with Vic Fangio where he plays a tricks concept versus 3x1s, if you're the weak side safety and you're playing tricks by a 3x1, you have to look towards passing strength. And you're probably going to have to fall down and essentially be what we call a quasi-robber on the play here, right? You got to watch passing strength coming towards weak side, and you got to jump those routes. So, if you watch a drill like the W drill, you're going to really get to see that hip fluidity, guys. As we're looking for hip fluidity, which, the 45s, you're also going to watch for the way they track the ball. Same thing with the 90s. You're looking for them to come down and keep proper pad height. There's a few little things you're kind of looking at here. You're looking at the hips most importantly, how fluid these people are as movers and stuff like that. And that's where I get a little concerned with this one, guys, as I'm breaking down players and I'm saying oh, is this guy the next ex-player. So in this case, I'm saying Rodney McLeod. Rodney McLeod was one hell of a fluid mover, guys. Rodney McLeod put up a 4.12, I want to say, something like that. Short shuttle. 5.10.5. Guys, that's a ridiculous number. You're talking about a very fluid mover. Like this is like top of the league type movement stuff you're seeing here for Rodney McLeod, right? Then he put up like a 6.5 cone drill. Yeah, guys, that's elite. Like that's elite hip fluidity. That dude's very fluid. That guy can move. When I look at it and I compare the tape, I see Maximus Pulley's tape and I see the instincts. The instincts are there. Very instinctful player. With that said, the testing numbers didn't necessarily live up to Rodney McLeod in terms of the lateral movement. In terms of his 40 time and his broad jump and his vertical, he's a pretty explosive player. I mean, the guy put up like a 4.53-ish, 40. He had in the 1.5s in terms of his 10 split. Then he put up like a 38.5-inch, vertical leap. If you look at his broad jump, you look at all these things, he actually played pretty well. He showed you some explosion. He put up like 16 reps on the bench, which for defensive back guys is fairly strong. This is a young man I'm watching because you're kind of looking for these players to come out of left field on you, right? There's a ton of bodies in that safety room. And I don't know how they're going to play a few of these guys, right? Because Gush might be playing more nickel than he's going to play safety, but we know that Vic loves to cross-train these guys. He loves to take his nickels and make them play a little safety. He'll make his safeties come down and drop into the box and play a little bit in terms of the nickel defensive back. So, I mean, when I see this, it is a little hard to project some of them if they're all going to be safeties, to be quite honest. But, you do have to look at the fact that they went in there and they got a special teams ace in Gray, right? A veteran safety guy that doesn't have a crap ton of playing experience. That's not really the concern there. But this is a dude that's one of the better gunners in the NFL and was already having Keely Ringo here. I am a little curious on what they're trying to do here. It does make you wonder if there's a bigger plan in play that hasn't been realized yet, if you will. Past that, guys, you got Marcus Epps, who is the veteran presence. He is the guy who's got a ton of playing experience. He's on the back half of his career. Not a player that I mind having on the roster. I think highly of Marcus Epps, but I think most people probably want an upgrade at that safety spot. I mean, I've heard a lot of you guys talk there. I like Marcus Epps. I think we'll be fine there. I don't think you can have all pros at every single level of your defense. But, if the Eagles are going to upgrade an area, that's probably one of the areas I could see the Eagles upgrading. I could see them potentially trying to chase a younger prospect at the safety position to kind of play back there. But, they do got Coop there. Coop is going to play in base. And then we'll have to see, once you subtract the base packages and you're bringing those now into the sub packages and you're looking at your safety play, is it adequate enough? That would be the thing to where if they don't address it in camp, that's probably something they'll pay attention to up to the trade deadline. And that's probably an area I would watch out for depending on how well Marcus Epps and some of these other guys that we're going to name, depending on who wins the job, how well they play in that role, given the expanded nature of things, kind of. Michael Carter, a guy who played nickel in the NFL for quite some time, was at one point in time was considered one of the better nickel defensive backs in the NFL. Some people even made the argument that he was top 2, top 3 guy for a while. And he was very athletic. This is another very fluid mover. This is a dude that can absolutely hustle. He's very athletically gifted. No doubt about it. With that said, he's undersized. I mean, he's undersized for a strong safety role in particular. And I know that Vic won't use those terminologies. He's not going to come out and call this one strong or that he's going to, he just basically has this kind of way that he plays his rotations in terms of we all start too high for the most part. For the most part, we start too high and then post-snap, we get into basically a movement-type shell to where it could be cover 3, it could be cover 9, it could be cover 6. Now you're rotating, you're moving basically around what your safety's responsibilities are, essentially. So, even in a cover 6, you could be playing to the, essentially the weak side, and you could be covering half. You're not going to cover strong side and cover half, but you get what I mean. You're changing essentially the role there. With that said, there's a lot to kind of unpack here when you look at these players and kind of how we're going to reshape this safety room. And I do think that Maximus Pulley is a guy to kind of watch your eye on in camp, a dude who can come out of nowhere. And that's what we're talking about, guys. Very clearly, just so you know, we're talking about who might be the dude that comes out of nowhere, who takes advantage of a situation and comes out on top because of this. There's a lot of names in that safety room. A lot of names. There's some guys that have experience in the NFL playing. some people who are basically making a transition and playing a little out of place. We know that Vic thinks that there's not a huge translation between the way that he plays his nickels and his safeties, but there's some variance to those responsibilities. They're not the exact same. They're similar. It's going to be interesting, guys. I don't know how this thing's going to shake its way out. This is a player I'm going to watch. I don't know until they put pads on. This position in particular, you can learn a little bit from like 7-on-7 drills and stuff like that. No doubt about it. You could definitely discover some. Even 1-on-1 drills. You can talk about how fluid the guy is. Did he stay in phase with the receiver? There's some things you can discover without pads. But I do think for the total responsibility of the safety position, until you put some kind of form of pads on and there's contact, then we're only talking about one side of the role here, which is coverage. You got to see them come up and kind of play like 7-man spacing in the run game. How do they react in those situations? Like, we still got the young man we drafted in the 7th round in Wisniewski. We got to see how these dudes kind of fit and how they play. I mean, there's a lot of names. This is going to be an interesting one, guys. This is one of the best battles in camp, in my opinion. This is one of those battles I think is worth paying attention to. If you guys get to go out there, and I know that they don't fully reveal a whole lot on the fan days when everyone's allowed to be out there, I would still probably be trying to sneak a peek out there just to kind of pay attention to that position group defensively. Like, okay, like how are they stacking them? Is there anything that they're unintentionally giving away here that maybe they didn't really think, or they're hoping that people don't pay that close attention to? Like, I would definitely be scouring for that kind of information, hoping you discover something there. It's just human nature, guys, even though we know that they don't want to give anything away. With that said, like, this is going to be a great, great race. And I think a lot of people have different horses they're backing here, if you will, right? You got people who are like, look, Marcus Epps is an experienced safety, man. Like, some of y'all are downplaying Marcus Epps. There's a section of our fan base that's really high on Marcus Epps. Some of you guys are like, look, Michael Carter, if you trust Vic and you trust his coaching staff, they wanted this guy here for a reason. We got to see what this dude can do with some reps here. Can he come out here? Can he win the job? Is this guy good enough to play, in this system? It's an interesting guy to watch, right? They spent a 7th round pick on Cole Wisniewski. Bigger dude. He's definitely physically a little different from the rest of these guys. This is a 6'3", 220-pound guy. So, I mean, he's going to be a dude that's going to be really interesting to watch. You're going to have some questions when you got a guy that large about whether or not how fluid they are when they move. But, we'll see. I mean, Cole Wisniewski's kind of an interesting guy. I covered him early on in the process. Interesting guy to watch. And then, you got your I think his name's Justin Gray, the young man we brought in that's, kind of a dude that's been a special teams ace, is a damn good gunner. Guy who's trying to probably make his way there is that last safety spot that's a special teams ace. That's a fight in itself there. Then we don't know what they're going to do with Gush, but the fact that Vic even knew Gush's name, it tells you that there must have been some part of him that must have sat down and taken a look at some tape and said, yeah, I want to take a shot on this guy. And then, you have this guy, Maximus Pulley, who I think is one of the more unheralded guys. I don't think a lot of people know about this young man because he didn't play a high level of competition. And that's the thing, guys, is like, without playing a high level of competition, we're all kind of taking a gamble here. We don't know. I'm waiting to see, man. Like, coming out from Western Kentucky to the Citadel, I believe is where he played, guys, right? Something like that. No, Wofford, I'm sorry. Coming out of Western Kentucky to Wofford, I mean, he didn't play high level ball in terms of college ball. But at the same time, like, what I saw on tape was a guy that was definitely one of the best players on the field at every game that I was watching, pretty much. So, seeing if that's going to translate to camp, I don't know, man. To each their own. We'll see. I don't like to put like a guy like say like, oh, this is my guy, unless I have like strong feelings from the tape I watched. I really like Maximus Pulley's tape and I really like Gush's tape. I think those two guys are very interesting. But both of them, it's going to be a little quasi and iffy here in terms of like how I feel them, because this defensive backfield, they took a lot of effort to get pretty stacked in. Like, to be honest, like they took some time and effort to really stack that backfield. So I'm going to see how it all kind of plays out, guys, personally. All right, y'all. If you guys want me to kind of go back and talk about some of the guys we talked about, I'll throw up the video I made about Gush over here, guys. One of the more popular videos I've made on YouTube recently. And then over here, guys, I'll give you like Mr. Wisniewski himself. I'll give you a video where I talked about Cole Wisniewski and kind of the way I saw the Eagles and, what they may have been projecting him and like just looking over his tape, what I saw from him physically as a player. All right, y'all, I appreciate y'all's time and attention, guys. Thank you all so much for liking, commenting, and subscribing on these videos. For all y'all that are hitting the hype button, I appreciate y'all, man. It is definitely one of the ways that you guys as a viewer can actually push videos. So if you're doing that, man, you're backing me, and I appreciate y'all for doing that. All right, y'all. Peace. I'm out of here.